That incredible moment where Virgil van Dijk just gives him a death stare. Like, you look at it and quake, and he's not even giving it to you. There's a number of people, Liverpool fans underneath that, are going, go to Real. I wonder if Real are like, second thoughts. You break it, you buy it. This video podcast is brought to you by Camarena, the most awarded tequila. And if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications so you don't miss a single upcoming podcast and our exclusive interviews with Premier League stars all season long. We back! Like Luke Littler. And what did we see this weekend? Liverpool toil in a chaos game against Manchester United. All matches should henceforth be played in the snow. Arsenal take the notion of going head-to-head a little too seriously in a slip at Brighton. Poor Tottenham Hotspur. Genuinely, I ate for Big Ange. And remember, Spurs fans, it could always be worse. You could support Everton. Manchester City, alive again like Freddy Krueger, still able to kill people in their dreams. And Thomas Tuchel watched almost every kick in his new role as England boss. We will break it all down. And I'm not here alone. It's a joy to say for the first time in 2025, welcome back, my friend from The Athletic, the Crown Prince of Harrogate. It's Mr. Rory Smith. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. It's a big week for Harrogate, Rog. It's a big week for Harrogate.
I know everyone who's listening knows exactly what you're talking about, but just for the few that don't, fill us in.
Harrogate are playing Leeds United in the FA Cup, and that is like, trying to think of an American equivalent.
The Pawtucket Red Sox playing the Yankees.
So what I need is a really, really posh suburb of quite a chippy city.
It's like Owings Mills in Baltimore playing the New York Yankees.
Right, fine, yeah. So Harrogate is this well-heeled, bougie little town. It's got a spring.
They know you live there, Raúl. That goes without saying.
Yeah, all right, there you go. That's what does it. It produces, it's got a famous tea brand, it does spring water. This week, they're making the trip to Ellen Road, to the heart of Leeds. And it's just a chance to put a really middle-class suburb on the map.
You can stick your tea rooms up your ass, Raúl. Let me get that one in quickly. How are you holding up, by the way, in the snow-covered Dales?
Yeah, we've had a load of snow, actually, which is obviously in America, you probably wouldn't bat an eyelid. In Britain, everything has ground to a halt, except Elon Musk's attempt to subvert our democracy. And we had a snow day today. So the Christmas vacation ended technically on Sunday, and we got the email at 7:30 this morning to say, by the way, your vacation's a day longer. So we're not quite snowed in, but it's tough going getting anywhere.
They should actually, Premier League should schedule games on a snow day automatically. Just own that. Own every single snow day. At Martin Koenig B2 says, dudes. Never been referred to as a dude before, but I love it. I see so many Premier League games just pissing rain. I also love that. How did Brunel, or one of those Industrial Revolution architect guys, not come up with the idea of a covered stadium? Seems like an obvious idea in late Victorian times. Raw.
Well, look, if you looked at Spain and Italy, they have these big open bowls, don't they? That's what most Spanish and Italian stadiums look like, effectively. They are huge. There is absolutely no shelter, no cover. Same in Argentina. And that's fine, because those countries have sunshine. In Britain, what we like to do is put a very small roof on, like that trend where people wear trousers that are too short for them. And so you put a very small roof on, so some people are dry. It creates the illusion of shelter. And it kind of makes people remember, I suppose, ultimately, that you can't escape fate, that no matter how close dryness is, you are going to get wet. It's important.
What is the point of watching football unless you're reminded of the truth that we're all going to die? As I listened to you, Raw, we had an English teacher who was an awful human being, Mr. Stott, who
You've mentioned him before. He's really made an impression.
Oh, he's a terrible, terrible, terrible human being. But he did, when we'd play like rugby against other teams in the freezing, I mean, just like minus 20, we'd play wearing just thin polyester little rugby tops, and it would be pissing down and you would be getting hypothermia. He'd always say, First World War poets always say, stand tall in the rain, it defines you. So I do think there's some of that for football fans. Although I've got to say, I love the idea of Brunel designing Goodison Park. I bite your arm off for a steampunk covered stadium. But we've got to get into the heavy, serious stuff. This is a week in which I will say Gareth Southgate was given a knighthood, a rise to Gareth, and I laughed for about 24 hours. I thought that was hilarious and mad until this weekend we learned that Inter Miami's Lionel Messi, yes, heard of him, was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. If you don't know what that is, listeners, it's a medal reserved only for individuals who, quote, have made exemplary contributions to the prosperity, values or security of the United States. I mean, gents played 39 games for Inter Miami. And I do feel for Brad Guzan, who must be like, WTF. But what do you make of it, Raw? Gent winning, was it the Leagues Cup he won? And then possibly his other great achievement is raising Michelob Ultras in a commercial, which I love. And he ends up wielding America's highest civilian honour.
Would he have been given the actual presidency if Inter Miami had won MLS Cup?
Isn't that how democracies work?
Is it performance related? Was it like, we'll give him this because they got knocked out by Atlanta? But if they'd done better, would they have made him head of the army?
President. I mean, that's how democracies work. You win MLS Cup and you have it all. I've got to say, I feel for Luis Suarez. All them goals and not even a Presidential Service Award for that man.
Speaking for your adopted nation, Rog, do America have like an equivalent of like the MBE and the OBE, the kind of awards that you get and no one really cares about?
I think the equivalent of an MBE or OBE in America is owning an NFL team. I think that's pretty well the way it works. If you're like important and you've succeeded and you've achieved, you get given just like that. I'm not very clear on the medal chart, but I think we got rid of the English to get rid of just the clutter of the lords and the dukes and that stuff.
Look, you say that, but I don't want to kind of reopen any old wounds, but they are quite old now, so no one can actually be offended. But do you not think that at this point in American life, having just someone called Sir Gareth might help?
I'll have to speak to someone who really understands the soul of the nation, like Kid Rock, to get a call on that. So let's pick that one up next week. The funny thing is, Lionel didn't even turn up to.
That is such a flex. It's such a flex.
A did not turn up. B did not send anybody. I mean, wild her for you. It's like Gareth Southgate couldn't be asked turning up to get knighted.
Do you think it's because Messi's really politically engaged and he disagrees fervently with Joe Biden's policies, or do you think he just thinks he's too important?
What else could it be? What else could it be?
Maybe was completely baffled to be given this honour that he very clearly doesn't deserve.
Yeah, I think probably a bit of all three. He's definitely very, very supercharged politically. He's very active on Truth Social, Lionel. But I believe this. I'm trying to get this confirmed. I believe he couldn't go. He did have an obligation. He had to pick up a pizza at that crappy little Miami pizza joint that he loves to. He loves to get his scran on. I believe he sent Emi Martinez to pick it up on his behalf, Raw.
Can't think what Emi Martinez would do with the Presidential Medal of Honor.
Can you imagine?
Can you imagine the gesture?
Can you imagine in that room with like Biden and like Bono and Ralph Lauren and Denzel? Denzel would have loved it actually, just to watch Emi Martinez just start dry humping our nation's greatest honour as if it was a Golden Glove.
It's quite an image. Emi Martinez should get some sort of medal of freedom.
Make it happen, Joe. By the way, poor Ronaldo must be seething, don't you think?
Do you know what? This will sound like I'm trying to do a joke. Yeah. I'm really not. I am pretty sure that he will be given some Saudi honour as a kind of mate weight. Yeah, he will get the Mohammed bin Salman Medal of Openness and Freedom from Oppression as a way of saying, it's all right, Cristiano. Don't worry, it's all right, Cristiano. Lionel's not better than you.
I bet you there's conversations going on in the Kremlin from Putin thinking, do we give him the hero of the Russian Federation?
We honour Lionel Messi. Yeah, maybe.
Send Emi Martinez for that one. By the way, lots of football to get to, but before I start with a toast, I want to thank you all for your deluge of beautiful, well, first of all, feedback on our holiday extravaganza, the Fusillade shows we unleashed over the past 2 weeks. John Oliver, Magnus Carlsen, JJ Watt, and more. All of it on our YouTube. Thanks to Volvo. Thanks also to you for our letters in our mailbag, which bulged, really did, over the holiday period. meninblazers@gmail.com. I'm grateful for all your wishes and questions. Laced a couple into this show today. I will say I'm digging out. I'm trying to answer as many as I can, as fast as I can, and to more. But let's start with the first toast of 2025 AD. Raising a third first Michelob Ultra, best Mickey since Arteta, to Raúl Jiménez of Fulham, whose 54th and 55th Premier League goals this weekend take him clear of the mighty Chicharito as the highest scoring Mexican player in Premier League history. And I admire Raúl so bloody much, not just for his goals, there's been a lot of them, not just because he's been magnificent as a player and humble everywhere he's been, and a Premier League pathfinder for a nation whose big players so often prefer the safety and the financial security of staying at home, but because of the way he so tenaciously fought his way back after that horrific head injury. You may remember head-to-head with David Luiz, then of Arsenal, horrific scenes off the field with oxygen, surgery, fractured skull, a life-threatening brain bleed, and to bounce back from that, not just physically, but mentally. It's been remarkable to witness. Resilience, excellence, felicidades, Raúl. What a general.
Yeah, I've always had a soft spot for Jiménez after what he went through. I spoke to him and his wife, Daniela, I think a year after, just as he was starting to return to play, about not just what he remembered of the incident, but what it's like going into a game every single time worrying, and it was definitely the case initially, worrying what happens if it happens again. And just there was a realistic chance of him dying from that injury. I find it remarkable that he came back at all, but that he's come back, moved teams, and has found this new lease of life is genuinely really inspiring. And I think it's hard to think, apart from maybe Chris Wood, of a more uplifting story in the Premier League this year.
Beto is
maybe
always the
Beto
answer.
just leaving. Yeah.
Oh my God. Don't just drop it that callously. Yes, Beto is almost certainly gone to Torino, Everton fans. I know I shed a tear too. I'm in bits. So let's move on, because repression is the only way to the football and a game of wonder. Liverpool 2, Manchester United. Yes, this happened too. Who saw this coming, Raw? This is Manchester United, utterly beleaguered by tabloids, revelling in the, let's be honest, fairly distant prospect of their relegation. A run of 4 straight defeats. I think no goals scored in the last 3 games. You got the flapping skin of the Rashford saga, mice infestation at Old Trafford, a leaking roof in the press conference room, and they had to travel to that cauldron, Anfield, place where they'd lost 3-0, 7-0, 4-0, 5-0, to play top of the table on a slot, squeaky clean Liverpool, unbeaten in their last 23 all comps. It felt very prey for Ruben Amorim before kick-off. A gent whose first week smile has been sucked into that blender of career-killing, life-sucking vortex it is Old Trafford. Raw, United, 14th place, nearly 4-decade low. I mean, all the stats are just so savage. I think even the most ardent fan of Manchester United that I spoke to before the game, every one of them hoped it would just be an exercise in damage control. Can you take us back to how you thought before kickoff? Set the mood.
I think there's a risk here that I'll sound like I'm trying to be wise after the event. There was an awful lot of stuff across here in the build-up to this game talking about how United were easy prey for Liverpool. You saw United fans semi-jokingly saying that they hoped the snowstorm would mean the game was called off. There was this sort of build-up that suggested Liverpool were going to steamroller United. But these games, and this remains the biggest game in Liverpool's season, Manchester United are Liverpool's biggest rival. That doesn't matter who's where in the table, they are Liverpool's biggest rival, and vice versa. It doesn't always follow the form book in that way. It's like all derbies, it's kind of separate from that. If you think about the 7-0, which was 2 years ago, United went into that in a really good run of form. They looked decent. That was the game before which Gary Neville said that he thought this Manchester United team were a match for Liverpool. There have been a couple in recent years where you've gone thinking Liverpool should win this. I think if you're expecting Liverpool to hammer Manchester United in any given game because of form and context, it suggests that you need to do a little bit more homework. I didn't expect an absolute battering of any sort. That said, I think it would be remiss of me not to say Liverpool should have run into that game and won it, because for all that Manchester United always lift themselves for this game, they are coming from a very low base. Liverpool, obviously, unbeaten apart from that Forest game all season, in fine form, in really impressive form over Christmas, actually, goal-scoring form. They seem to have found a bit of their mojo back. They were overwhelming favourites. They are clearly better than Manchester United. And it was there to be won, but I don't think anyone at Anfield would necessarily have assumed it was going to be 4-5-6-0.
Well, Ruben Amorim, incredible. I mean, must have read the Premier League script when he said, was it 5 games ago that there was a storm coming? I mean, that is just like Chekhov's gun, because it was icy cold, rarely snowed in Liverpool, absolutely blanketed. United, I'd say it was very curious from the off, girded their loins. It was surprising to me, I've got to be candid, just how much, having watched them all Christmas, I mean, rollover, keel over, clueless, visionless football, watching them attempt to make a fist of it. Was astonishing. They scurried, they harried, they hoped. Liverpool early propelled by the bombast of Alexis McAllister. They did flex their muscles in transition, but it was noticeable how admirable United were in their endeavour. That was steps forward, green shoots of character in there, digging in, charging down the left-hand side when they could, behind Trent, on repeat. De Ligt laid one in on Gravenberch. Maguire ploughed hard into Luis Diaz. I mean, this was heavy swords, Raw. A stalemate, yeah, but for United, I mean, that must have felt like a win after this truly terrible low period. But what was different for you? Was it the midfield, Ugarte and Mainu? Was it their mentality? Or was it just Liverpool being oddly slow to start?
Well, there's probably 4 things, which is not an ideal number of things, so I'll try and be fast. One is that I think that is United's strongest team. And we saw in midweek when they played Newcastle with a completely different midfield. That midfield does not work. Ericsson and Casemiro does not work as a midfield. You cannot play that in a serious football match anymore. Hopefully Ruben Amorim has now realised that. My guess is that he did it against Newcastle so that he could keep Mainu and Ugarte for Liverpool. That is the kind of midfield basis around which United should build. But that was their strongest side. Number 2, they'd had a week of training, which is really rare for Amorim in these first 2 months of his time at Old Trafford. He's had several days on the training field, and he's clearly been able to inculcate a system in his players, and that's really encouraging. There's no
in his strangely high-pitched voice.
In his strangely sort of simultaneously threatening and gravelly, but also slightly squeaky voice. Yeah, I think that's an unabashed positive, that it looks like with time on the training pitch, he can make this Manchester United team substantially better. Number 3 is that Liverpool were not good. Liverpool, whether they were surprised by the steel of Manchester United, whether Liverpool were assuming that if they scored 1, United might crumble, which I think could possibly have happened if they'd scored early. United maybe would have realised, there is a gulf here and we're not going to be able to bridge it. And then the fear starts entering your thinking. And it didn't come, so Liverpool lost confidence as United gained it. That seems reasonable to me. And number 4, and this will sound a bit of a cop-out, the weather. It's really hard to play football if the onus is on you as the attacking team in weather like that. And Jurgen Klopp used to mention it occasionally when it was very windy, particularly. He'd say, well, in the wind it's difficult to play. And everybody would laugh and say, ha ha ha, but both teams play in the wind. That's true. But if the onus is on one team to attack more than the other, they will see the wind as a drawback rather than a benefit, because it is a bit of a leveller. And I think the weather did affect the nature of the game. It's not an excuse. It doesn't excuse Liverpool's performance in the slightest. But I think it does change the nature of the game. In that sort of storm, what the game will naturally become is the sort of battle that United wanted it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, going back to the beginning of this show, that the idea, and if Liverpool's owners are listening, a steampunk-covered Anfield would solve a lot of bloody problems. But by the way, having said that, Liverpool did install a new roof over one of the terraces, and it was bloody leaking. And when I saw that, I thought maybe that was a factor. United must have felt like they were playing at home. But over the holidays, we watched United nosedive. I took no pleasure in that, obvs. And watching them over and over, the narrative was there's this epic clash between Amorim's rigid system and that squad, that United squad. We talked about it before, how it's almost like an exquisite corpse of a squad been put together under so many different managers. It's honestly been like what the dialogue between those two has been like a conversation between two people who speak completely different languages. It's like me trying to order a meal in Uzbekistan using grunts and gestures only. But this felt very different, and I think you're totally right, Raw. This is what, if I were a United fan, why I would feel mildly ebullient after this game, because what was different here was the time that he'd had on the field without the fog of Christmas games coming fast and furious. And it was surprising to witness, and Liverpool were frustrated really by the resolute play of United, which we have not seen. We were told this was going to be a bare-bottom spanking Højlund blew him one-on-one. Alisson stood up to him. But we also know this, Liverpool under Arne Slot are a second half team. We've watched that over and over. The adjustments he makes, so subtle. He can change everything. They've scored more goals in the second half this season. This is amazing. Than United. I think they've scored 25 before this game, which is more than United had scored in total. And they did, God bless them, open with an Olympico attempt, which Onana just about parried. Arne Slot's agonised reaction suggests that Liverpool trained at Olympico corners and Olympico corners only all week, Raúl.
Yeah, I think that the expectation when they went in at half-time at 0-0 was, okay, that hadn't been great from Liverpool. They still, they were still creating chances. They looked like they could open United up. There was clearly, they looked like the team that was on top of the table, and United looked like the gutsy visitors. But the expectation was Liverpool get better in the second half. They always get better in the second half. They have done that in pretty much every game under Slot. I don't know if that's just a positive. It might be a negative as well. I often feel that if you're getting better in the second half, maybe you should try and do that in the first half as well. Imagine how good you'd be. But then, of course, the risk to that is if you concede a goal 7 minutes into the second half, that does rather spoil the plan a bit.
Yeah, and it was such a stunning moment. I say that as a neutral Raw with no skin in the game. Trent Alexander-Arnold, really a woefully misplaced clearance. United pounced. Archly destructive slip pass of a ball from Bruno Fernandes. I think it was so cunning. In the first second, it even fooled Lisandro Martinez. It kind of took him a moment to adjust, but then he just swooped in, thundered it past Alisson. First United player to score at Anfield since 2019. Jay Ling's RIP. How did you feel in that moment? Because genuinely, you know me, Raw, I don't like to be hyperbolic, but it was, I mean this, it was. I felt it was as close as I've come in my life to watching David kill Goliath.
Yeah, not great, Rog, not gonna lie. I suppose because it was relatively early in the second half, you felt, okay, there is still a chance. There's still, this isn't over yet. But maybe looking back, maybe the sort of subconscious psychological reaction was that was the moment when I went from, this is a game Liverpool should win to take advantage of what else had happened this weekend and to maintain their momentum at the top of the table for their title charge. That all went, and I just sort of thought, do you know what, a point's not bad. Just get the game over and done with, it's fine.
God, that's when Everton are 1-0 up, I sometimes think that, by the way. When we're 1-0 up, I'm like,
I know,
yep,
don't get me wrong, I sometimes think that when Liverpool are 1-0 up as well. At least they've scored.
These probably in the 1-0 up, be like, yeah, I'll take a point.
Probably to be honest, probably in the Merseyside derby. If Liverpool score first, my reaction is Everton probably won't score twice, so we'll get a draw. At least that's fine.
God, by the way, this was another moment that talks about the footballing truism, and we'll talk about this again in this show. Football teaches you the most important life lesson. We all know so little. We almost know nothing. It makes a fool out of all of us. But before I could even write that into my game notes, 7 minutes later, Cody Gakpo conjured art. Growled onto a McAllister pass, cut inside De Ligt. I think he sent De Ligt for a cup of tea. And then just lashed the ball like a right-footed Mo Salah is really the best way I can say of describing it, right into the far corner. 3 straight games with a goal for Gakpo. What's fascinating to me was his reaction. Astonishing moment of superlative football. Almost no reaction at all. Just like, put the ball back on the centre spot. Let's go and get a winner.
Yeah, he's been quietly extremely important for Liverpool, has Cody Gakpo this season. It took a while for the goals to come in the Premier League. He's featured a lot and done very well, particularly in the Champions League. I suppose the Carabao Cup as well, if you care about that sort of thing. And it does seem to be that he's forced his way into Arne Slot's first team. That it looks like that front three of Gakpo on the left, Diaz through the middle and Salah wide right is what Slot feels is his strongest. I'd be interested to see what happens when Jota is fully fit, see whether he maybe slots in for Diaz, but then it's hard to drop Luis Diaz. But part of that is because of the form of Gakpo, and he does give them that real cutting edge down the left, which I think they've missed a little bit because Diaz isn't quite as reliable a finisher.
Yeah, I mean, we know that Slot ultimately makes changes to win games. It's what you talked about, the old footballing adage, it's not your starting 11 that is important, it's your finishing 11 to close out the game. And here he tried to conjure a different energy, inserted a quite bellicose Darwin Núñez, Diego Jota, And it felt like their impact may have won the day. 67 minutes, big moment. Again, De Ligt will not be looking at the highlights. McAllister's header hit his raised arm. VAR sent the referee to the monitor. These are the phrases we all know and love in football now. The arm was not in a natural position. It was outside, quote, the silhouette of the body. But it did feel, in that moment, cruel on Manchester United. They dug so bloody deep. Mo Salah from the penalty spot, automatic for the people. Gent has 18 goals, 13 assists in 19 Premier League games this season. The most involvements ever by a player in that spell, in the history of the competition. I think the record for a full season is 44. Mo on course for 62. Watching him in that moment, Raw, sitting on the turf, he's really specialised in celebrations that both commune with the Anfield faithful but also transcend it, make it really... I mean, about him in this moment, that spotlight where he's over-delivering every goal, contract negotiation leverage, arms outstretched. It was like watching a king with Anfield as his very throne.
Yeah, and I think that's not accidental. I'm becoming slightly uneasy with how Salah is kind of discussing the contract situation. And look, I don't know. It may well be
about
that
his Instagram post.
His Instagram posts, his interviews and stuff. And I'm, as a journalist, I'm never going to tell people to stop talking.
Do we think Mo does his Instagram posts?
I would assume he's got someone who does them for him. I don't know. Probably not. I mean, they're not. He's obviously not taking the pictures, but I would presume there's a team member.
He's amazing at it, though. That trope he's got of always taking a photo with him and the key goal scorers or key assisters post-game. We're about a team, but by the way, me and the lads, we did this.
Yeah.
And then today, the post with the 3 contracts up for renewal, just that photo, no comment. He's quite a good influencer as well as a goal scorer.
He's got a future in it, Rog, if the football thing doesn't work out for him. I don't know. I think it's possible that you're reading things into everything because of the circumstance, and it might be that that's how Salah would have celebrated had he signed a 7-year contract. It does feel a little bit like he is trying to make that leverage public in a way that all I'd say, and this isn't me talking as a fan who would be desperately upset if Mo Salah left. Obviously, it would be disappointing. It would be sad, in fact, that's the right word, as a Liverpool fan to see Mo Salah leave. But I'm in my 40s. I've seen players leave before. There's always more footballers. I think the risk with Salah, there is a point at which it's no longer Mo Salah's making a point. There's a point at which I think fans maybe think, do you know what, Mo, could we maybe not do this quite so much? We love you, don't get me wrong, but maybe not all of the time. And I think that is possibly approaching.
Just to try and understand what you're saying, Mo, stop posting like images of you dancing, laughing while crying and laughing. Those memes that that we can't read into transfer negotiations on.
The slightly more serious point is he gave an interview to Sky Sports across here that was broadcast on Friday, I think, in which he said that Liverpool and his people are still far away from a resolution to the contract negotiations. That is designed to put pressure on Liverpool. Does it make it look like Liverpool are trying to lowball him, basically? I would suspect that the numbers involved in terms of salaries, if people knew what Liverpool were offering and Salah was saying that's too far away from what I want, that might also, and I don't know the figures, but that might also kind of change the way that it's being perceived. Salah clearly has huge amounts of leverage. He is a beloved superstar. Liverpool fans would by and large be devastated if he left. But these things are delicate for both the club and the player. And my slight worry is that sat on Salah's side, that's been forgotten, that it can kind of turn if you don't handle it carefully. I
got it. The FSG need to up their meme game in the negotiations. We need John Henry to do. I don't know what Mo Salah's smoking or update his old. Those were the days when John Henry tweeted. But Liverpool fans, for a moment, just revelled, singing at United. They're quite witty and, I admit, quite painful. You're going down with the blue shite. But not so fast, my friends. And I did admire this moment so much. This United team, who have been so bloody stuck in a mire, crapping the bed again and again, somehow they dug so bloody deep. Garnacho on as a sub, changed the game, fired a low ball in, and Ahmad ran late. I think he scuffed the shot, to be candid. Had to go through the legs of Why Always Me, poor Andy Robertson, which wrong-footed Alisson. A stunning moment. Again, the celebrations for Manchester United were intense and immense, roaring. Their fans delirious. Virgil van Dijk barking in anger and confusion. Go back if you have a minute, listeners, and watch that moment. It's like epic cinema, the way they're match directing these moments. And mad, what a player he is. He loves a goal against Liverpool, Raw. My question is really, did United use their next decade's worth of goals at Anfield in that moment?
Sadly not. I'm sure that they'll score more. Ahmad's been the standout. I think we've touched on this before. The standout of the nascent Amorim era. I think most of the squad should probably look at the way Amad Diallo's kind of taken his opportunity under Amorim and think, right, well, that's clearly what I kind of have to do now. But ultimately, it was exactly what United deserved. That it would have been really harsh. They would have taken huge positives, I'm sure, from a narrow 2-1 defeat in which they played really well. I think that would have been the sort of defeat that United fans would have been able to swallow to an extent, playing far better than expected, giving Liverpool a real fright, given where they were coming from. But United deserved the point from that game.
Tottenham's narrative.
That is Tottenham's narrative. United deserved the point from that game, and it served Liverpool right to an extent for what was curiously, for the team with the best defence in the league, a curiously wayward, sort of ramshackle, nervy performance in defence. They didn't look as assured as they have done. United took advantage.
You're leading us, Your Honour, in a roundabout way to the evidence of one Trent Alexander-Arnold. We talked about Mo, but Trent hooked, kind of lollygagged around at times. Liverpool fans now finding any clip where he's tracking back at a jog. There's that incredible moment, you can find it on our Instagram, where Virgil van Dijk just gives him a death stare. Like, you look at it and quake, and he's not even giving it to you. There's a number of people, Liverpool fans underneath that, are going, go to Real. I wonder if Real are like, second thoughts, you break it, you buy it. They've been very public in their courtship of Trent. But they look at this and be like, you know what? Mo Salah rarely tracks back. Trent was totally exposed, very little defensive cover. There was an element of this quite grand overreaction in this moment, which is that his head is elsewhere, which I don't fully understand because Mo and Virgil's head also has to be elsewhere, but they're still very good at that football thing.
I suppose it's different for Salah and Van Dijk, partly because of their age, partly because they're not from Liverpool, and partly because they've moved clubs before. So, I mean, as I say, I feel like the Van Dijk one in particular should be relatively easy to sort out. He's your captain. Unless he's asking for something absurd in terms of financial remuneration, it feels to me like there should be a deal that's not too difficult to do there. He's also not your highest earner. Salah and Alexander-Arnold, I think, are more complicated, and Alexander-Arnold is emotionally much more difficult because he's been at the club for 20 years. He is a Scouser. He is the vice captain. He would be the next captain after Van Dijk. It's a huge thing for him. So I can understand why it might have more psychological impact on him. But the thing is, I'm not sure, how on earth are we meant to know when Trent Alexander-Arnold should have been not jogging to close down Bruno Fernandes? Was he thinking about his contract? Was he thinking, I don't know what these people are thinking of me about Real Madrid? Or was it just a lapse in judgment? Just all players make them. Trent Alexander-Arnold does make them. I think that it's always been the case that his lapses in concentration are sort of focused on in a way that isn't true of other players. I think what Arne Slot said about United deliberately targeting him and having Fernandes and Dalot there causing him problems was absolutely correct. You might say that the issue there is that obviously Salah isn't necessarily the most workaholic in terms of tracking back and supporting his right back. So I think there are mitigating circumstances in which it was a difficult afternoon for Alexander-Arnold because you had two really good players playing really well against him. This is what I mean about Salah. Alexander-Arnold has said nothing about his contract, except the most, I think maybe a couple of really bland platitudes at some point. There's been nothing really insightful. He's not keeping people abreast of negotiations. He's not dropping hints on Instagram. And yet, there is a point at which Liverpool fans are clearly starting to think, well, look, if you're not that committed to the project, to the club, then maybe we're not that committed to you.
Oh, how do you? I mean, he's giving us Sally's last game, the hand to the ear, the talking into.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was a weird one because I mean, you've not agreed a contract. Like, you've caused that chatter. It's not insane that people are talking about your future. I thought it was
Real Madrid are talking in my ear, lads.
It could have been, yeah. They're offering me money. They're offering me loads of money. Yeah, I don't know. I think
maybe I'm learning to speak Spanish.
Maybe he was hand gesturing in Spanish.
Yes. He was trying to do that, and he didn't get it right. I've got to say, I love your theory. This is one I'd not thought about, Raw. That when he was just jogging back to try and cover a United attack, he was right in his mind in that moment was the force majeure part of his contract. He was wondering if he should try and tighten it.
I think there's a very good chance. If he was thinking about his future in any way in those moments.
That clause.
If he was thinking about his future in any way in those moments, it will have been him thinking, I bet it doesn't rain like this in Madrid. That is surely the only relevant factor.
No one's talking about whether they need covered stadia in Madrid. By the way, you mentioned it already. We do have to talk about this. This pains me. Liverpool, nervy moments down the stretch. Very nervy. Both teams sought to find the winner. The very last kick of the ball. I think 20 seconds to go. Drama, tragedy, comedy, if you're a cruel bastard. Xerxes broke down the right, and in one of my WhatsApp chats when he came on, poor Xerxes, who'd been laughed off the field by United in their last game, he'd come on and I wrote, God, wouldn't this be incredible if Xerxes delivers the winner? He barrelled in on goal, clearly did not fancy or have the confidence to try and finish in that moment, so he just dumped the ball off square to, of all people, Harry Maguire. In many ways, Destiny's child. A gent who's had a bloody good game. He's so tenacious. And in that moment, the goal beckoned. The headlines were all his. He actually, if you look at it, he points to where he wants the ball delivered, which is really amazing. Kind of skidded to him fast off what I'm generously trying to say, Snoke Field. And he bloody went and skied it over the bar into the darkness of the Anfield night. Raw. So brave to demand the chance. So Harry Maguire to totally blow it. And I feel his pain. I mean, it was less a football highlight, that second Raw. It was honestly like the entire work of Arthur Miller crushed down into one kick of a football. It's
going to be hard for me to express huge amounts of sympathy in this situation, Rog, I will admit. I've seen that dance before through John O'Shea. And his name sort of lives on in Manchester United legend because of his late winner at Anfield. Maguire would, given the circumstances, would have been even, a hero of an even greater order. I mean, the nicest thing I can say is I'm glad he missed. That's all.
All I know,
a draw was a fair result, Rog.
Yeah,
he just did it in the interest of sporting integrity.
I think that's fair. Fair, and where Ange would have liked it, it was fair and equal. All I know is that the Ghanaian Parliament is going to be lit this week. I can't wait for their political response. But that was it. Manchester United descended into Anfield. I think, thank God, defanged all that relegation nonsense. Went punch for punch, toe-to-toe with Liverpool. It was their best performance under Ruben Amorim. It really was, in many elements, magnificent. Bruno, truly terrific. I loved his quote at full time. We can't be satisfied. I'm pretty upset. If we can show this at Anfield, why can't we do this every week? We need to be aware we need so much more from ourselves. Raw, I know United beat City and then lost 4 straight. So can you give us some perspective?
So I was fascinated by not just Bruno's interview, but Ruben Amorim said something similar. I think Lisandro Martinez said something possibly even stronger to the BBC about it, everything being in the mind, that it's sort of mental application, I suppose, that separates United against City and particularly against Liverpool. I think they weren't great against Manchester City, but they were superb at Anfield from the team, the shambles that has appeared in the games between those two events. And it's interesting because it's presented as, those interviews are greeted as, blunt and frank and honest and sincere and a breath of fresh air. But at the same time, I think if you're a fan, you have a right to say, well, hang on, so are you saying Lisandro Martinez and Bruno Fernandes, players who have played in these other games, that you just weren't trying? Or are you exempting yourself and blaming your teammates? I think it's a really interesting thing. It's an interesting trope when players come out and say, essentially, the good thing that we've just done, that's just we had our concentration right, our minds were right, which therefore suggests that when you've done all the bad things, as United have done plenty of in recent weeks, that you are admitting that you were not mentally right. It would be different if they'd come out and said, yeah, we had a week on the training field with the manager, we understand the system a lot better now. You'd be like, yeah, okay, that makes complete sense.
This is who we are now.
That does not reflect badly on anybody. You needed that time. This is who you are. Let's go and do it. I think to say the difference is that at Anfield and presumably at the Etihad, we were paying attention. I'm not sure. Do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of getting the Most Improved Player award as a young footballer. It's a bit, it's a compliment, but it's kind of not.
What were you doing before? I was just pissing around.
Yeah.
By the way, the same goes with Amorim. I find him very fascinating. He's constantly throwing barbs out about the culture at the team. We talked post-game of trying to, quote, shock the team because it's, quote, too comfortable. All month he's been taking very specific targeted lumps at the reality he's inherited at Old Trafford. I think he's walking a fine line of separating himself from the culture which he leads. It's a pretty dangerous game, Raúl, because it does run the risk of being rejected by it at a certain point.
Well, yeah, and you have to remember that overhauling that squad is not a quick thing. You know, there's a couple of stories around the last few days suggesting that, you know, obviously Marcus Rashford might leave. I think Alejandro Garnacho's been mentioned as a player who might go. I think you can assume that the vast majority of Manchester United players are for sale, and if the right sort of offer arrives, they will sell them. Everyone except Diallo, maybe. But I agree with you. It's a dangerous thing to do because you might alienate the squad completely. But also there comes a point where you wonder, are you kind of extending this excuse-making culture by blaming the excuse-making culture? Do you get into kind of a meta excuse that there's something rotten at Manchester United? Fine, that 14th in the Premier League is fairly self-evident. By going on about it constantly and using that to excuse your performances, are you actually adding to the number of excuses being made? I think it's you're not going to believe
I'm the
same as you.
Places.
It's slightly. It feels slightly uneasy, and I would agree it's a tightrope.
Quick one on Liverpool. Where are they for you?
Top.
God, you cocky bastard. I mean, where will they be at the end of this? Will they take courage from the fact that they didn't lose? Or will they be like furious about how often they were opened up, B, that they let the hard-fought lead slip, or see that this was a chaos game, the complete opposite of the control football that Slot clearly loves, which is refracted in the incredible stat. XG Philosophy tweeted, Liverpool created more XG against Manchester United on Sunday, 3.01, than when they beat them 7-0, which was just 2.91.
So the positive spin is it's a bit of a wake-up call. I think Liverpool are, as Virgil van Dijk said afterwards, a work in progress. I think the occasional kind of shock is probably the right word. The little kind of reminder, look, you're not there yet, is not necessarily a bad thing. I would absolutely have taken 4 points from 2 games against Manchester United at the start of the season. That's a good return. Can't complain about that. They don't have to play them again. It's actually now in Liverpool's interests for Manchester United to start being good, because they have to play Arsenal and Chelsea and Manchester City. That would be helpful. And yeah, I think the chaos element is true. I think if you combine the fact that it is a game that United will always pick themselves up for, as Liverpool used to when Liverpool were poor, they would go to Old Trafford and quite often win, draw, really give United a scare, even in their lower moments. If you combine that with the weather, and I know that again sounds like a terrible excuse, I think you have a game that you kind of have to say, do you know what? These ones happen. It's okay. The worrying thing is that they've now dropped points in 2 of their last 3 home games against teams they should probably beat if they want to win a title, Fulham and Manchester United. In vaguely self-inflicted circumstances, they played very badly in patches against United. They had a man sent off in the 17th minute against Fulham. I think there are signs that Liverpool are not... They're very clearly not the finished article. It's going to be nip and tuck either way. And my overall kind of concern, view, whatever you want to call it, is I think the lead will be chipped away by Arsenal over the next few months, because Arsenal have more kindly fixtures than Liverpool remaining. This was a weekend in which Liverpool could have put an extra couple of points between them and Arsenal, and those might have proved crucial. Now it's going to be a real test of nerve for both teams. Liverpool's nerves maybe not quite as iron as we thought.
Still healthy lead, it's got to be said. 6 points in the game in hand. Midweek clash with Tottenham in the Carabao semi-final. But you just mentioned Arsenal, so let's get to them. Brighton won. Arsenal won on a freezing night on the south coast. Arteta had warned Liverpool that he'd chase them in the second half of the season. We did expect a certain fury from a team now revelling completely in their set-piece FC image. especially the fact that Brighton have been plateauing. Hurtzler's boys, 7-game winless rut before this one. Yes, Arsenal were without Martin Ødegaard, who's on the bench feeling poorly. Got the old Spurs bug doing the rounds of North London. Kai Havertz also had it. Football, as a reminder, are human beings too. But they began trying to play that collective possession hungry, that methodical, quite slow football. Brighton flickered a little bit through a dinger. Their fans just seemed to entertain themselves by booing poor bug-eyed Belgian Benedict Arnold Trossard. But then Mourinho, I think it was, freed Ethan Nwaneri, who slid down the right, cut inside to Panzer Stupian, then shot early. I think that's what caught out for Bruggen. Or just the fact that he decided to let the ball flap through his reach into the far corner. Well, this was a beautiful moment. It was like watching Starboy 2 Electric Boogaloo. A gent, how was he, 17? It's like Luke Littler age. The style of the goal, the confidence, both allowed his team to take the lead and also at the same time answer the question, is the life after Saka?
And it felt poetic as well, didn't it? Because Saka, obviously the homegrown superstar who's driven Arsenal to these heights, his injury looked like it, it may well still prove to be a considerable blow for Arsenal's title hopes. The fact that Nwaneri has come in, scored a goal, looked completely unfazed by playing first team football, just doesn't seem to really have noticed that this is meant to be a massive step up. For him to sort of immediately fill that role of scoring game-breaking goals, which is what Saka does so frequently, just felt like, he felt like a regen, and that is very reassuring for Arsenal.
Carry on, lads. It is. The Kai Havertz came on this show a couple of weeks ago and said that when he looks and trains with Nwaneri, it's like he's played for 10 years already. He's got that kind of confidence, that kind of experience. And I'm sure our Arsenal fans, it is such a deep breath to witness, even though he had to go off with a knock. But what happened next was slightly... Well, if you've watched Arsenal, this is what they do, but it's a choice, a determined effort, almost to stifle the entire flow of the game. Low tempo possession. I think Partey at one point took forever just to unleash a throw in. Nwaneri, when he was still on the field, was booked for killing time forever while taking a corner. Arsenal have had 9 yellow cards for time wasting this season, which is like almost double the next, and it came to haunt them. On the hour mark, Brighton were honestly quite impressive in response. A moment of quite regretful decision making ultimately by Saliba. How Pedro in the area, causing mass hysteria, flicked the ball into the air. This was slightly odd for a lot of people. Saliba kind of decided to head the side of Pedro's skull. It was a rare penalty. An odd penalty, you don't see it often. We've got to be candid. Arsenal fans incensed. Saliba, if you watch it, actually did get the ball before going head-to-head. Arteta said after the game, I've never seen a decision like this in my career. I asked the boys if they have. Nobody's seen it before. By the way, I'd love to know the Arsenal player who'd step up in that moment when Arteta's losing his mind in the locker room and be like, yeah, I've seen it, boss. But when you look at the incident, Raw, the distance, the player, Saliba touching the ball, after Howe touched the ball, can we get an official ruling, please, PGMOL, Rory?
Well, when PGMOL eventually do deliver a ruling, it will be that they were right for a reason they have come up with afterwards. It is a strange one. I'm presuming that certainly the VAR had access to all of the angles, including the one that showed Saliba heading the ball. Arteta
was pissed that they looked so quickly. That was the other element.
Yeah.
They're like, boom.
Whether they're kind of going on his trajectory anyway, and they've decided that it's reckless, I don't know. I'm not sure. It's one of those, I don't expect to see anybody else concede a penalty for that this season. And that's...
Oh, God, is this another just only Arsenal rule? That's the only not person sent off for tapping the ball?
Let's stress this. It's not because it's Arsenal. It's because occasionally referees make these slightly odd decisions, and you get them more and more with the kind of over-refereeing by VAR, in which they kind of establish a negative template. And it may well be that PGMOL will come out in a few weeks and say, yep, that one shouldn't have been a penalty, which will be scant consolation to Arsenal. But it has happened before. And I'd also point out that did Arsenal not get a penalty at West Ham for a goalkeeper punching someone in the face around the time he punched the ball? I feel like that might have happened as well. So, yeah, sometimes you get weird decisions. This was a weird decision.
For a second, Pedro was in total agony. Thank God it was just of the footballing type, because he got lashed a penalty home. And then fascinating to watch how Arsenal tried to respond. Because once you've tried to hold on to a lead and then conceded it, it's very hard to just flick that switch back on again and re-summon a rhythm. Down the stretch, particularly when Ruter and Minter come on for Brighton, they honestly played the tidier, more cohesive, bolder, intense football. Arsenal had trouble breaking their press for stretches. If you were an alien who came down and watched the game and someone in the pub told the alien that one of these two teams was trying to chase the title, you'd honestly, on the pattern of play, you think Brighton were that team, Raúl.
Yeah, but also the alien would be really confused by quite a lot of the concepts, like what's a title, why are there only two teams, what are they trying to do, does this
matter? The alien
matter?
will be so annoyed at, what is this PGMOL thing?
The alien, by the end of the game, would be convinced that PGMOL were involved in a deep state conspiracy against Arsenal. Yeah, I think Brighton have kind of levelled out a little bit from where they were earlier in the season. They were previously producing that standard of football over long stretches of games and therefore winning them. They are now producing them only in patches, which is something Brighton do for periods of the season. They will come good again, and then they will dip again, and then they will come good again, and then they will dip again, and they will finish somewhere between 6th and 10th. And Arsenal did look shaky in those last sort of 15, 20 minutes. They did look like they were playing against a really good team who had their tails up, which is exactly what they were doing. And I suppose the message there is you kind of have to finish games off. You can't take the lead even in difficult away games and start indulging your more cynical motivations.
Yeah, I mean, the 4-game winning streak over, points dropped again. This is the motif. I think 7 draws this season, 5 of them from winning positions. That's an agony for Arteta, and are currently, because this can change, I think the story of Arsenal's season, it is the January transfer window. I mean, Arsenal look, and everybody knows this, Arteta, when pressed upon it, talked about the reliable source of goals with Saka out for 2 months after surgery. They know they need the sharpen threat. That's kind of his message. He talked about in his press conference how they tried to get a player in the summer but couldn't find the right fit that matched profit and sustainability. But Raúl, this is a squad that has spent so much on its backline. I mean, should we expect a change in the next couple of weeks?
It's felt to me all season as though Arsenal might have, the pendulum might have swung just a bit too far in terms of Arteta, I think, set out maybe 18 months ago to make them a lot harder to beat. And I think he did that successfully, but it does seem to have come at a cost of a little bit of cutting edge. Without Saka, without Odegaard as they were against Brighton, that will tell. I think that's probably fair to say. And you wonder, it seems so basic, and I really don't want to think this, but there is this kind of leitmotif of Arsenal need to sign a proper number 9. And then obviously Gabby Jesus comes along, scores 4 goals against Crystal Palace in 2 games, and you think, okay, there's the number 9, not a problem anymore. Whether he can be relied upon to do it consistently, I don't know. But you do wonder what Arsenal would be like if they had, Alexander Isak or Victor Osimhen up front.
It would be nice to see. That's all I will tell you. Talking about balance, Manchester City 4, West Ham 1. Rory, it's still out there and it's alive. 6 days after Pep Guardiola said City's win at Leicester, quote, cleared our minds and our souls. Trying to pretend like Manchester City have a soul. They rocked at home to a fairly turgid West Ham, who just leaked 5 to Liverpool. City might have been 14 points behind Liverpool at kick-off, but once they'd locked in, goals came early and often. Arch creator Savinho scored his first against Leicester in the previous game, now dancing with malice and end product. Even now, he has a signature goal, which he crafts already, where he kind of floats this stunning cross raw, tantalisingly out of reach of the defender and the goalkeeper. It's almost like a back shoulder fade to Erling Haaland, who's now scoring again after his 4-game drought, 3 goals in 2 games. That stay humble curse, it's over.
Yeah, this was always going to be an interesting little period in City's season after the long slump from early November until the new year. 2 months for Man City is an age. They then had Leicester, who are not brilliant, and West Ham, who are worse than that, and they've got Salford in the FA Cup, who are 2 or 3 divisions below them and therefore should be beaten. Although it is a local derby, so that lends a certain frisson to it to proceedings. It was always relatively likely they would win these 3 games, And the big question for me was, right, what happens after that? Can Manchester City be reset? Can they get their confidence back? The two things that I would say about these wins, and this isn't me searching for negativity, Leicester could easily have taken a point. They could really easily have taken a point. They had 2 or 3 good chances before City finished the game off. West Ham had more shots than Manchester City.
They had 17.
They had 17 shots at the Etihad. And I cannot stress, Rog, how bad West Ham are. West Ham are a really bad team. So how on earth did that happen? Because if you do that against a better team, they will punish you. And all right, maybe in that scenario, you end up drawing 4-4 or something. But West Ham had more shots. They had more shots on target. I don't know about the XG, but I think they might have had more possession. That's astonishing.
It's true. City still, that would be my headline. City still do not look like themselves. I mean, this is still a team that are vulnerable at the back. We're still in that mode, in Pep's own words, of having to score more goals, concede fewer. You wrote a fantastic piece over the holidays that I would encourage anyone to seek out on The Athletic about the intense toll the management takes. Stress on Pep begins with his list of symptoms, which he says long and unsettling. He has trouble sleeping. He can only take light meals in the evening. On some days, he does not eat at all. He finds it difficult to read because his mind keeps wandering. He feels at times intensely lonely. Things can get so bad they begin to take on a physical form, bouts of back pain. I mean, anyone listening who doesn't have this in their own life, you know how this is. He has breakouts on his skin, which reminded me, Raw, of a letter in our mailbag from GFOP Chris Shawwood of Wisconsin at meninblazers@gmail.com, who wrote, Rog and Raw, when was the last time you saw a City player look like they enjoyed playing football? Maybe winning brings joy, but what if joy leads to winning? I think Pep should uncoach, put forth an anti-system, let these men play like the boys they once were. How much worse could they be?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, that they're obviously, while things have been bad, the City players have looked harrowed and haunted and stressed, and that's natural. And obviously when they get the first couple of wins, then that turns into relief more than joy, and I think that's perfectly normal. But even in the good times, it does feel a little bit like City are somehow, the individual is inhibited while the system is expressed, and I think that's kind of what Guardiola wants. That's what his football is. That's what has led them to all those trophies, all those wins, all that glory. So I'm sure they wouldn't say they hadn't enjoyed it, but I do wonder how many of them feel as though they maybe could do with just a little bit more freedom.
God, Raw, that slogan, the individual is repressed as the team soars, or whatever. Sounds like some propaganda from Romania in the 1970s.
What better inspiration for a title-winning football team than Nicolae Ceausescu's Romania?
I think ultimately Sean Dyche is a big Ceausescuist tactically, but we'll get to him. But first we've got to talk about Crystal Palace 1, Chelsea 1. Raw, Maresca was right all along. Non-title challengers. They did have a miserable Christmas since we last spoke. Winless in 3, back-to-back defeats. Huge relief then, 40 minutes in, when Jadon Sancho showed absolutely no respect whatsoever to my friend Chris Richards, faked him out of his shoes at the halfway line, sped to goal. In the 1960s, an incredible footballer for Brazil called Garrincha, just a dribbling legend who used to beat his man and then let his man get back up, cover him, and then beat him again. That was what this goal reminded me of, a Garrincha clip, because Chris Richards charged back to cover, sourced again, crossed to Palmer, artfully, stunningly finished. God bless him. Nutmeg finish, I think. It's like watching Jadon Sancho treat Alabama's finest like Michigan treated Alabama's finest. But late on, Chelsea got this nasty tick of being a leaker after the 75th minute. This is their 6th goal that they have leaked in that window in the last 9 games. Palmer actually was dispossessed, but a quite excellent Munoz. Ball worked to Eze, who quite unselfishly squared the ball back to ensure that Mateta had the kill shot. Well, I guess that's probably what Xerxes saying to Harry Maguire. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. 8th goal of the season for Mateta. Huge point for Palace. Chelsea won 5 straight, now dropped points in 4 straight. And we laughed when Maresca said we are not title challengers. Turns out he was a prophet, but he kind of forgot that he's the bloody manager. And when you put that bad vibe into the world as a manager, it can become self-fulfilling, demotivational. Chelsea are now title challengers that never were, or are they just now top four hopefuls?
Well, not quite out of it, I think, just because I'm not sure. I still think we've not quite got our heads around as a kind of football culture what this title race is going to be like. It's not a City-Liverpool title race from 2018-19 or 21-22, where everyone's going to win all of their games and it'll be whoever gets to 98 points. I think it could be maybe not quite as low as 80 points, but 82, 83 might just do it. And if Chelsea can find a little bit of a run, your prediction that they will win the league might yet come true. But I do agree with you. I do wonder, it's fairly obvious that what Maresca was trying to do was simultaneously reduce the pressure on his players and in some way challenge them to prove him wrong, trying to invite the role of underdog. I do wonder to what extent he's maybe created the fact that became the party line from Chelsea. I think Cole Palmer said something similar about, we're just learning.
Not title challengers.
Not title challengers. We're just learning, mate. We're just learning.
That's too many words. He's only allowed to. He's like Cole Palmer's like a Twitter engagement question in 3 words or less.
No title.
Yeah.
No
title challenges. Why? Just learning.
But I wonder whether that has created just a little bit of a sense that Chelsea do not maybe don't have to maintain the same standards as Liverpool as an Arsenal, and they have in the last few weeks shown that tiny little gap can maybe make a difference. So I still think Chelsea have such a deep squad that they are a threat. But there's no question it's very hard to dress it up any other way. It's been a bad Christmas.
Quick pickup on a important legal issue. Legal scholars have written to us en masse about our conversation about Cole Palmer trademarking the cold celebration that he didn't even invent himself. At JocusBur11XH wrote to us on Blue Sky, such a catchy handle. He or she wrote, "You ask Rory if in England you can just claim things are yours even when they aren't, like Cole Palmer's celebration. Roger, gotta say, that's how England took control of North America for a bit there, son." Roy, you told me this was history and not felt, but it clearly is.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, that is the way England operated for a long time.
King George should have just trademarked it. That's his bloody mistake. That's what we're realising. But before I risk the ire of my nation's people, Tottenham 1, Newcastle 2. Oh, Raw, this pains me. We've got to talk about Spurs. And before we dive on in, I do want to acknowledge Spurs fans. We are not out to mock you. I know this is an exhausting conversation. You tell us it is. I'm actually super fond of Spurs. I'm really bloody fond of Ange. I adore him. But we just can only talk about the results. That's ultimately what we're talking about here. And when your team are in some kind of a tailspin, as they were into this one, this is what we've got to talk about. I mean, we are in Big Ange, I think, a kingdom from our horse territory. I mean, the terraces are up in arms, just 1 win in 7. Terrible injuries. 6 hamstring injuries alone, I think. A ravaged by illness squad on top of all of that. And just kind of tossing warm bodies out there, patched up back line, youngest starting lineup in nearly a decade, possibly focusing a little bit on the Carabao Cup semi-final this week, keeping some powder dry. But they gave a start to third string choice keeper Brandon Austin, incredible character, 25 years old, first game in over 3 years, his debut. For Spurs, 19 games total in that career, 5 for Orlando City, solitary US under-18 cap via his dad. So the reality was, this was very much like the Liverpool-Manchester United game. We were predicting a beatdown, but God bless football. Again, after burying Tottenham for half an hour before kick-off, they only went and opened up the scoring inside 4 minutes. Pedro Porro, peach of a ball, Dom Solanke, doing it for the Mangasellis, flung his head at it in front of Thomas Tuchel, and it all felt so delirious, Raw. But when I said earlier there's just one human truth in football, Raw, that we don't know anything, there's actually 2. And the second one is, you should never score too early.
Exactly. Don't give fate plenty of chance to prove you wrong. There's been a kind of dichotomy about Spurs all season, which is, as bad as the injuries have been, and there's no question that the injuries are, epidemic now at Spurs, they're quite good going forward. Scoring goals has never been their issue. They scored 3 against Liverpool. That's really good. Well done, Spurs. You shouldn't concede 6. That's a bad idea. But they scored 3 against Liverpool. They are good going forward. They've got lots of really creative attacking players. Son's not having a great season, but Kulusevski is. And Maddison has been in and out a little bit, but Maddison's been good. Solanke, I think, is coming good as a signing. He was a lot of money, and he's not Harry Kane, but he has fulfilled his brief to an extent. The issue has always been at the other end, and it's been particularly pronounced because if you look at the substitutes bench for Spurs, you had Chaz and Dave, who were there.
Chaz and Dave, an English 1-2 hit wonder, huge Spurs fans in the 1980s. Google them, America. You'll get Chaz and Dave Tottenham. You'll get a little sense of
what it used to be
bedknobs
like,
and broomsticks. Oh, smoke up the chimney. Those days. They're on the bench.
The only actual Cockneys who've got less convincing Cockney accents than Dick Van Dyke. Daniel Levy was on the bench, and there was a giant cockerel. There was just a man dressed as a cockerel. He was one of the substitutes.
God, Ange, you don't know anything. Put the giant cockerel on you.
Play the giant cockerel centre half and see what happens.
Put it on. See what happens. The big lad. It's not a big lad. It's a giant cockerel. What you've just said is so true because to me, Spurs are almost like the first Premier League team who are like one of those NFL teams where they're all offense and their offensive play calling is legit amazing, but the defense is total ass. They're almost like the Premier League Cincinnati Bengals. Big Ange, just bring in a defensive coordinator, NFL style. Get a scheme and you'll be okay, mate. But that was what happened. God bless Spurs. That rule, don't score too early, ... is especially you, Spurs. 1 clean sheet in their last 26 games. It took just 2 minutes, 20 seconds. Spurs caught trying to play the ball out the back. Yes, a Joe Linton hand accidentally and in a natural position stopped their progress. Big Ange didn't like it. We'll get to that. Anthony Gordon wasted no time lashing home from an angle. And it really did look like there was just one team going to win this. Ultimately, it was Newcastle. We do need to credit them. They are so impressive. The general consensus is since Tonali was moved to the number 6 role, they are transformed. But they do have this incredible mix of physicality and guile and true control and an idea of football moving forward with real pace and cunning.
Yeah, they've got a really high quality kind of first 15, Newcastle. And I think once they're fit, all in the right place, and humming along, they're a really good team. And as you say, what stands out about Newcastle is that they're not an unsophisticated team in any way. They're technically very good. They're very slick. They've got a lot of pace and creativity, but they're also very physical. And I mean that as an unadorned compliment. And I do think they are potentially kind of a wild card in the second half of the season, not necessarily to win the title. I think that's probably too far gone, but they will cause a lot of teams problems if everybody stays fit. If they can keep on playing like this, they kind of look like a juggernaut building steam.
And everyone stays fit and everyone stays at the club. And so it was. 38th minute, soft-centred Spurs disintegrate. Jacob Murphy, what an excellent player he is. Cross, flicked in off, I think it was Dragusin, God bless him. Prodded it goal bound, came off ultimately off Isak. 7th consecutive game with a goal for the beautiful Swede. What a footballer. God bless Spurs. They were so determined in that second half. I think Brendan Johnson and Reggie on their woeful finishing was kind of emblematic of just that lack of clinicality. But it must have been a peculiar agony because the team were so admirable. The delta between their valiance and you throw in the injuries and the sickness and the 0 points to show for it all. It does feel like emotional purgatory. 10th loss of the season, exactly 50% of the games. And watching Ange, I want to say, it does pain me. He must be desperate for reinforcements. His post-match interview, Raw, slumping, suit jacket barely on his shoulders, just repeating very deliberately the phrase, things weren't equal and balanced, like 4, 5, 6 times, same phrase over and over. Whatever he meant, the officiating, I'm guessing, he looked in true emotional trauma. He said afterwards he was the angriest he's ever been in his career. He's in a state of anguish, Raw. I ache for him. The way Spurs are run, it feels at times as if he's the face, but the front office is making this not a serious football project.
Yeah, I do think there are probably questions to be asked of the extent to which they kind of invested in youth, and they've signed another 21-year-old goalkeeper from Slavia Prague this week. And you look at players like Archie Gray, who's incredibly talented as a midfielder.
A child.
But he's a kid, and he's playing centre-half He's playing central defence in the Premier League, and it's not his position, and it's not kind of what he's meant to be doing at this stage in his career. Even Pape Matar, who I think has been great for Spurs, early 20s, there's not a huge amount of experience in that team, and I do wonder whether it's the injury crisis they have would have bitten regardless of who they'd signed last summer. If you've got this many injuries, you don't have a problem. There's no way of circumventing that, short of signing like 7 or 8 more players. But I do wonder whether if they had slightly more experience in their ranks, whether they might be able to ride out some of the more kind of impactful parts of it.
Everything feels it's about the Carabao Cup semi-final, which starts against Liverpool on Wednesday. Huge credit to Newcastle 2 weeks ago. 11 points behind Chelsea, 5 straight Premier League wins now. 5th place, point off Champions League, and a generous run of games to come. In other matches, Aston Villa 2, Leicester City 1. Truly shattered Villa, dug deep in this Midlands derby. Shorn of John Duran and Morgan Rogers out with suspension. John McGinn limped off with a hamstring. Needed the CONCACAF thunder. Liam Bailey came up big with the winner, first goal of the season. 5 straight defeats now for Ruud van Nistelrooy. That new manager bounce burning off. Leicester do seem more organised, still leaking goals, self-inflicted mistakes, a centre-back or 2, a desperate need in this transfer window. Let's talk about Fulham 2, Ipswich Town 2. 5 draws, 6 games now for Fulham. But Ipswich, signs of life, finally a fully fit squad. 3 second-half penalties, kind of felt like the longest penalty shootout in football history this game. Liam Delap, he won a slightly suspect penalty against Chelsea in the last game, which gave Chelsea their first home win. In this one, against Fulham, 21 seconds after the Cottagers had scored a penalty of their own, Jen was barely touched, but he acted as if he'd been hammered with a brick to the back of the head. Does Liam Delap just feel gravity more than mere mortals?
Well, it acts upon him more than anybody else because he's so big. That's just science, Rog. That he's easier to knock over because he has more gravity. I do wonder whether the fact that he is a kind of typical English burly centre forward maybe makes referees slightly easier to trick.
You think they're more sympathetic because he's
not sympathetic, but I wonder whether if he was like an elfin Argentinian, they might be like, yeah, that guy's diving. But because he's a great big sort of thick-set Brit, they're like,
he doesn't.
He seems like the honest sort.
He doesn't do that. He's not that kind of player. By the way, I love your thing. That's science. It's like doing a football podcast with Bill Nye, the science guy. Southampton 0. Brentford 5. My God, the Saints are the last rites for them, I think. 20 games, lowest ever points total in Premier League history at this stage, just 6. And the ultimate sign of how crap they are, they let Brentford win away. Saints now under new management, Ivan Juric, who I've got to say I loved his first press conference where he talked in depth about his love of death metal. He wants a death metal style of football, and his football's been more death, I think, than the metal part. Not many managers name-check bands like Napalm Death, Obituary and Carcass. Carcass and football, they don't get a lot of overlap there, but I did enjoy his welcome press conference. He's then proceeded to lose his 3 games in charge. This one to the Bees, who've been bafflingly impotent on the road, but were rampant on this day. Their first win in 5. And Raw, I don't know if you saw this clip, the hilarious scene, which is up on our Instagram, post-game in the Southampton hospitality suites. Remember, Southampton had just been obliterated before their home fans 5-0. And for some reason, Southampton still thought it was a good idea to force their striker, Adam Armstrong, who'd actually played in the game. He was compelled by the club to arrive in the suite after he'd showered to present a prize jersey to the supporter who'd predicted the correct score in the swanky suites. She'd predicted, as a Southampton fan, that they would lose 5-0. And when she went up to get the jersey, she was booed by everybody. She was beaming. She just got a shirt off Adam Armstrong. Adam Armstrong had a face on him, like he was at a funeral. I mean, Raw, not just losing, but truly humiliating their players in the process. It's pretty surreal.
But there's so many levels to that, isn't there? There's the fact that a Southampton fan went and thought, you know what, yeah, we'll lose 5-0. Or if I say we lose 5-0, then at least I get the benefit of a free shirt. There's the fact they made Adam Armstrong do it. The fact that all the other Southampton fans.
The fact that he agreed to do it. By the way, huge respect to Double A.
the fact that all the other Southampton fans booed a Southampton fan for correctly identifying how bad their team were, it's beautifully put together, the whole thing.
It is. If you look on the Southampton fan site, a number of the fans are angry at her for being the cause of why it happened. I'm not sure it works.
She
like
manifested
that.
it.
Yeah, she manifested it, which I just love. It was like as if Ricky Gervais, in his office days, had written a snapshot of life during one of the worst seasons in Premier League history. Tonight, Wolves play Nottingham Forest in the Nuno Memorial Derby. Godspeed, which leaves us with the predictably awful Bournemouth 1, Everton 0. Everton's long run of no defeats in 2025. It lasted for one game. Can I say, I did quake. I mean, this is where it's got to. I quaked in the run-up to this. Playing bloody Bournemouth, tiny Bournemouth, and I was crapping this. I really was. Tells you everything you need to know. It's a club with vision against one who have not had a drop. But, Raw, I don't know where you were for New Year's Eve, but as the clock struck 12, I was thinking about one thing and one thing only. The statistic that in calendar year 2024, Everton had won in the entirety of the whole span of that year. They'd won just 8 games. 8 games. I mean, which calls into question yet again, what are we watching? Why are we watching it? The amount of time I spend watching Total Dross, which is a choice. Father Andrew O'Connor, a great GFOP, sent me a quote by the Dutch religious philosopher Henry Nouwen, who wrote, "Once you choose to claim the joy hidden in the midst of all suffering, life becomes a celebration." But Raw, sod Henry Nouwen for a second. 8 wins.
Yeah, what's the matter? That's one every 6 weeks. Is that right? Everton win a football match every 6 weeks. Sounds about right. Somewhere like that. Maybe a little bit more.
Oh, I'm interested. I'm interested again.
That is very, very depressing, and also completely unnecessary, because Everton are, for all the the financial problems, Everton are a massive club. And as you say, you look at teams like Bournemouth and Brentford, who don't have anything like the historical footprint or the fan base of Everton, and they have done things that seem completely out of Everton's grasp in terms of having a vision, having a plan, having an idea, and I don't know why that has taken root. But that is, to win 8 games in 1 year, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Also, how did they stay up?
Don't relitigate these things. How do we beat all these points deductions and survive? It's because we survive to darken the door of all those who choose to support them. I think that's ultimately it at this point. They only...
Eight wins is 24 points. That's not enough.
You throw in the points deductions, baby. We had a very good spell in the second 6 of the season. It was a very odd moment where we went to a tailspin, barely won, but the other teams below us didn't, and we just about kept going. I don't want to relive those moments. There's enough terrible ones week to week to week in the present. I mean, this one was a fairly awful game. Brighton by Bournemouth's incredible winner, 77th minute, a stunner. It was Kirkes who wafted across, an incredible cross, and David Brooks, can't even be angry at him. Not the New York Times David Brooks Raw, but the Hodgkin's lymphoma surviving Welsh striker. If you've not seen the goal, listeners, find it. It was like a leaping side foot volley. It was brilliant. It didn't even hurt. It was so good. Let's quickly praise Bournemouth for a moment. Raw, 7th place, 3 points off the Champions League places. The Bournemouth Golden War Cherries, best life for them, best ever points tally, best ever position through 20 match weeks, unbeaten in a club record 8 games. The American owner, been on this show, Bill Foley, was laughed at when he bought the club, said my goal is to take them into Europe. The strategic alignment that he's inculcated into that club, empowering Raúl, who is a tactical genius, to help his team. So it has been incredible to witness.
Yeah, really, really impressive. He surely now would be the natural kind of native, organic, domestic contender for any of the kind of major jobs that became available. Absolutely vindicates Bournemouth's decision to replace Gary O'Neill with Raúl, despite the fact that kind of received wisdom was that Gary O'Neill had done a good job. They have a distinct style. It suits their squad. They make all this stuff that, for a lot of teams, seems extremely complicated, look very, very easy.
Talking about very easy, 0 shots on goal from Everton.
I mean, that helps.
dross, sweet dross. Sean Dyche said post-game, "It's not a bad run on paper if you had wins in it," which I can't stop thinking about that logic. If you apply that to anything in life, it's just an insane way to approach everything. Last 10 games, we have failed to score in 8 of them. I think we scored once in the last 10 games from open play. Everton fans currently in 2 modes. Dyche out, or else just keep praying for 3 teams below us to lose every week. I'll say this is a massive first test for the new owners, the freaking group of Houston. The press have been briefed this morning that they have been, quote, assessing the club's direction and the future of manager Sean Dyche over the weekend, which makes me think of delicious scenes out of Conclave. Raw, did they keep Dyche? Did they make a move? Who would take the job? Everton fans, I think, want Graham Potter, David Moyes too, which I'd love. He's such a good man. Rooney's free, Raw.
Rooney is free. Slightly checkered CV. Moyes would make sense, but I don't know how much impact he would be able to have to kind of differentiate from Dyche. I think Moyes is probably a better manager than Dyche, and there'd be a wave of romanticism around him. But it's still asking a limited squad to do the same limited thing. Graham Potter is a little bit more of a kind of long-term culture shifter, and that might be good. I'm sure that Graham Potter would do an extremely good job for Everton in the long term. Whether you need that or not now, I don't know whether it's worth the risk. My instinct would be to maybe stick with Dyche and then reassess at the end of the season. But as you say, it does feel as though Everton are one good Ipswich run away from being in real trouble.
We are in a world of pain. And when we're in a world of pain, I just say to myself, I'm happy for Neil Maupay though, Ro.
Yeah, Neil Maupay's having a whale of a time.
Yeah, it's great. By the way, I do think Everton should punish Neil Maupay by recalling that bastard from loan. Peterborough in the FA Cup on Thursday away. God help us. Okay, we will close after this marathon post-Christmas period show with a letter from a GFOP, the mighty Tim Walker from Lake Villa. Or is it Lake Villa? Do they do the foreign pronunciation? I don't know. From Illinois. Tim, drop us a line. Tell us your address. I'm going to send you a beautiful hand-woven coveted MIB patch. Raw, do us the honours. Read Tim's Raven of the Week.
Lake Villa sounds like it's just a house. Just send it there. They'll find him. Tim, right.
Like Santa's grotto. All those letters get there.
My question is for Rog specifically. I have been a long-time watcher of the MIB show and listener to a variety of the buffet of podcasts, and just realised something. For being such a proper Evertonian, Rog attracts a heavy dose of Liverpool supporters into his life. Chief among these are John Oliver, Rory Smith, John Green, not quite sure what order that's in, and his beloved brother Nige. Does Rog have any insight he can share on how this phenomenon has come about? I realise he has many other friends who support other clubs, but the heavy prevalence of Liverpool supporters made me wonder, question, and write this email. Love and courage, Tim.
God, Raw. Maybe I've just got terrible taste in friends. Is the
limited choice?
Yes, probably more the second. I had for my wedding, I had my brother Nige and my best friend Jamie as my best friend Jamie of Blue. And that they opened up their line in their speech. They said, Rog chose us both. It wasn't a hard choice because I am his only brother. And Jamie said, yes, and I am his only friend. And there's truth in humour. It's such a bloody good question, which I've never thought about, Tim. Never thought about it. I think there's 2 factors, and you should weigh in about the prevalence of Liverpool fans, Raw. But in America over here, when football became popular, Premier League football, 2014-15, all the American fans were like, I'm going to choose a team with fresh eyes, without geographical connection or familial ties. That Liverpool story, they didn't want a front runner. Like a bandwagon jumper, but they want a team that could possibly win. And that Klopp team particularly was so attractive, straining with every sinew to win. He was so attractive. They never walk alone. It's the only club where they play on the broadcast. I mean, that moment is really a clincher. But I will say this. You asked me when we first got on Raw how it was being back in Liverpool over Christmas when I went back to see my lovely mum Val. I was really shocked when I was home for the Chelsea game at Goodison. When I walked through the city, when I grew up, Liverpool was 50-50 blue and red, proper. in this new global world of football, when you walk through the city centre and the market stalls are everywhere, they sell almost exclusively Liverpool stuff now. I was shocked. The dominance of Liverpool in the city of Liverpool, the Everton stuff, honestly, in those market stalls was like kept round the back. They'd have a few scarves. It's like an old newsstand that used to keep its porno mags discreetly under the desk at the counter. Everton are now a massive club in my dreams and in historic memory. Freakins, please God, will change that with their Toyota-thon ways. But Liverpool fans are everywhere, Raúl.
Yeah, it reminds me of something someone told me who used to work in the kind of apparel industry, who said that when Manchester United re-signed Cristiano Ronaldo for that glorious second stint, they sold an extra 1 million jerseys. So they normally sell, I think, a couple of million a year, and Ronaldo was worth another 1 million authentic jerseys sold by Adidas, United's kit manufacturer. And the comparison he made was with kind of big historic English clubs, Everton, Villa, West Ham, and they will reliably sell maybe 100,000 jerseys a year. So Cristiano Ronaldo himself has 10 times as many fans as West Ham United or Everton or Villa, someone like that, teams of that ilk. And I think we do underestimate, certainly over here and possibly even in the US, we do underestimate kind of the scale of difference between the absolute modern giants and the speed with which they've accelerated away from their traditional peers. So there would have been a point where Liverpool and Everton had roughly as many fans as each other. Liverpool may be a little bit more popular, but not by an order of magnitude. Now I think they are not in any way comparable, really, in terms of global fan bases. Liverpool will have millions upon millions more fans than Everton. And this isn't me saying this is a gloating Liverpool fan at all. And for that reason, yeah, you are likely in your life to encounter more Liverpool fans than you are Everton fans.
Oh, who's your friend in apparel? Were you just being modest there and not telling us that it was Tommy Hilfiger who told you that story?
That is my friend Ralph Lauren. We're very close.
No, God bless. That is it from us. I am headed back to Atlanta this week. Warning to all you incredible Georgians. I am so excited to attack 2025 with passion and joy and wonder. We have some huge interviews this week, which I'll tell you about in our newsletter this Friday. Subscribe via our website and I will let you know. It really is a magnificent start to the year for us. But Raw, it does not get better than this. Thank you, you beautiful human being, you red bastard.
It has been an absolute pleasure. What better way to start 2025?
You red bastard. This is Rog sending you big love. Let's not take a second of watching football together for granted. And courage.